So what if this thing we called stress doesn't really exist? Hans Sale, I think back in 1939 or 1940, is credited with coining the phrase stress. But stress was a term designed to describe symptoms that are basically the symptoms of a fight or flight response that's based on the need to survive and or reproduce. And for humans, that fight or flight response gives us all these stress response types of symptoms: heart pounding, butterflies in the stomach, muscles tense, shaky, sweaty, mind goes blank, dry mouth, all those things we've talked about before. That is the stress response. So we can't cure stress because stress is just a response, but we can learn how to adapt to stress. One of the stressors in life for humans is to do with sexuality. And when I was teaching relationships in grade 11 health quite a few years back, I found a great article, and I found it again recently, and it talks about the primary drives of men and women. And we use generalizations here as long as we allow for the concept that some people can be exceptions to it. So we're going to talk about women in general. According to this author, women in general, primary need or drive is to bond as part of reproduction. They're looking for a husband or a mate who can protect and provide so that we can reproduce as a species. Now, the author that wrote this study didn't do a research study. It's based on his own evidence of being a marriage counselor for years. So this is frontline evidence of dealing with tons and tons of couples. So in general, women's primary drive is to bond and have that stable relationship to raise offspring. Now, men, we often think our primary drive is sex. Because we have a huge sex drive, that's our main drive, and we therefore are driven to reproduce. But this author argues that that's not man's main drive. He says man's main drive is to decrease his frustration level, that men don't like to be frustrated. Now, where does the sex drive fit in on that? Well, men have a higher sex drive in general due to the testosterone, and therefore, if that sex drive isn't being met, then they're frustrated, and then that leads to their frustration, their challenges. So he suggests, or tells about an example where, a woman is planning a lovely romantic picnic lunch. She's doing all the work. She's got the basket ready, the wine glasses, she's made it up, she's got the tablecloth to lay down on the blanket and all that stuff. And she'll make it all up. And the guy's kind of thinking, man, I just want to have lunch. I'm hungry. And so he starts to hem and haw and complain about what's going on, and it causes angst between the two of them. Now, if he would realize that the idea behind the picnic was the woman wanted to bond, and he just flowed with it, right? Instead of fighting it or freezing and all those things that would happen, instead of arguing with it and fighting it, if he just flowed with it and enjoyed the day and enjoyed the drive and enjoyed the time together, well, he's probably going to get lucky after that lovely picnic, because her needs for bonding will be met, and therefore his sex drive needs will be met. So I thought it was really neat to understand that point of view and where we come from. And I think that helps a lot, understanding the differences in the sexes in general, always allowing for exceptions. So that was the one part. The other part he talked about was communication. And when girls communicate, they go face to face, and they talk about things, and they talk at a much deeper level than we do as guys. Now, when girls are mad at each other, they go shoulder to shoulder, and then they don't talk to each other. Now, men, however, when we're side by side with guys, that's when we're comfortable watching a sports game or something on TV, and we'll be comfortable that way. And if we'll talk about things at a general level, we'll know whose kid's having trouble at school and what's going on at the office, but we go to a certain depth. Whereas when women talk, they go to a much deeper level. I'd always joke that Valerie's friends knew more about my sex life than I did. That's things girls talked about. Guys, we'd never talk that deep. So guys, we're comfortable shoulder to shoulder. But as soon as guys are uncomfortable with each other, then we go face to face. We got our fists up and we're ready to fight. So understanding that when you run into a conflict situation with someone of the other sex or gender, so a girl's upset with a guy and she goes shoulder to shoulder with him and he goes face to face and wants to deal with it, and she doesn't want to deal with it, so she turns away from it. So there's a conflict there, which brings out the whole stress response, this fight or flight response. Whereas, a guy, if he's happy with things that are going on, he's happy to be shoulder to shoulder. He doesn't necessarily want to go face to face. He doesn't want to talk as deep in conversation as a woman would want by going face to face as if she was talking with another woman. So the cool part to understand of this is when we understand how the other gender works, then learning how to flow with that can stop a lot of the angst. And going back to what I started with at the beginning, I don't think they'll be able to cure stress, because I don't think stress is an illness. I think stress is just a set of symptoms based on our human need to survive, which is the fight or flight or freeze response, and our human need to reproduce. And how do we beat that? We learn to flow. Don't judge people. Instead of walking a mile in their shoes, spend some time inside their skin and think how you would want to be dealt with if you were the person on the other side of that coin. That's all for now.